Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Once again, my name is Gabriel Loredo. My pronouns are he, him. And I'll go ahead and let my co-presenter introduce themselves real quick.
Hello, I'm Karen Monero, and I really appreciate being invited today. My pronouns are she, her, and I will turn it back to Gabriel. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Karen. Today, we have a dense presentation, and so we'll try to break it up as much as possible. It is a lot of information to cover. We usually try to do it in an hour and a half, so we're condensing it even more to an hour. So we might take out some pieces that are just extra information, but we'll make sure you have all the information that you need. It's also a dense presentation, so we'll try to make sure it's as engaging as possible. As I said, I just ask that you kind of look at this presentation with two lenses. The first thing is, that you're never alone. We have staff here that can really support you in supporting any students that you are working with. And you have the consultation services available either with CAPS or case management services. The other thing is, it's a tough time for all of us. We're still dealing with the pandemic. It's been a hard 18 months, and we're not at our full capacity. We're not it's not business as usual. We're all going through and feeling still a lot of from this pandemic, and so we know that we're going to see kind of after effects from COVID and in terms of mental health. And so just want to humanize what's going on and realize that, it also starts with us and making sure we are addressing it. And so through some of the resources that we do have on campus, we'll make sure to share which ones are available to you all as staff as well. But with that being said, I'll just go ahead and jump right in. Can you all see the screen okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Yes, thank you. So today, what we're hoping to do is partner with you on how we can create a campus culture of health, how to identify signs of distress, what resources are available for students in person, by phone, and online, and how to refer students in need of assistance to the appropriate office. One thing I forgot to mention is at any point, if you have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and we'll make sure to address it when appropriate. And we want to make sure you ask your questions because this presentation is for you. You're using your lunchtime to attend this presentation. So just thank you for being here. So creating a culture of health. What we mean by a culture of health is a positive culture of health and safety can be defined as a community with a high probability that somebody will identify a student with distress, make an intervention, and engage appropriate resources. So what I love about this definition is really, it doesn't say that nobody will ever be unwell or nobody will ever be stressed. What it really is focusing on that we can identify, make an intervention, and engage appropriate resources. So again, not putting that all on you all, but making sure you know where to go. This relates to how the environment supports health. So what is UCLA doing to support mental health and well-being? What are our individual departments doing to really support this individual mental health and well-being? How do we communicate about mental health and well-being? So are we making jokes about it? Are we taking it seriously? Are we using exaggerations to and diagnoses to kind of say, make points with what we're trying to do in terms of, having a bad day and we're just saying, oh, I'm so depressed today. Kind of making light of mental health diagnoses. And what are we sharing with our students and with our peers and with our colleagues? What are we sharing about the importance of mental health and what we do? How do we interact with each other about mental health? Again, are we joking it off? Are we avoiding it? Sometimes people avoid talking about mental health because they don't want to feel like they're prying into somebody else's life or feeling nosy or just, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm not going to say anything at all. And so how can we make sure to kind of build in that level of comfort when we do talk about mental health? Who has access to supportive services? So are we really looking at, are we reaching all student populations and how can we continue to eliminate any mental health stigma that might exist? And then how are we promoting those resources? Are we utilizing our own spheres of influence to say, hey, here's this resource that is available to you? So how can we put this in syllabi, in our departments, on our departmental websites? How can we make sure that we are promoting these in our own spheres? And the reason we focus on this is because the more we're able to focus on prevention, the more effective resources will be and the wider ranging positive effects that will be felt all at UCLA. So we know what a culture of health is now, but we know that there's still barriers. There's real life that happens. We know that UCLA is competition and perfectionism, so we know that imposter syndrome runs rampant with the students that we work with. And imposter syndrome can be very isolating. So it makes the student or person, and even ourselves, feel like we're the only ones facing what we're going through. And so then we don't talk about it with others. We don't share what's going on because we think something's wrong with us. And so it really isolates our students, even though they might be seeing the same things and feeling the same things. They don't talk about it because they think they're the only one. We also know, with the age of social media and just having high achieving students, we know that our students are trying to have 4.0 GPAs, be involved in 20 different organizations, have a healthy social life, have a healthy romantic life, volunteer, have different job experience for when they graduate. And so they're putting a lot on their plates. And so when somebody sees their peer doing that and they're not doing it, again, it brings up that isolation and imposter syndrome, but also just students feel like they don't have any time to add anything else on their plates. Staff and faculty feel the same way with our academic department roles, depending on how staffing is doing right now, navigating work from home, but possibly also being in the office. Some days can be, people might still be transitioning to this kind of new normal for right now. We know that the perception that only big changes can make a difference can really stalemate people. We feel like the decisions have to come from the top down, but we can really focus on what our departments can do, what our supervisees can do, or what can I do to really help students. If we're able to focus on that, we'll see that we have a lot more range in our sphere of influence to enact changes. Simple things, for example, could be during our staff meetings, just really checking in and having that time for our staff to check in about what's going on. Maybe it is, sharing one resource every meeting that can really help with making sure our staff and our colleagues know what's out there at UCLA, because there's a lot. It's just sometimes hard to navigate. That working in addition to taking classes in financial distress has been a big barrier for students taking part in self-care practices. And then the last three, transitions and uncertainty, staying at home to concerns with COVID exposure, grief and feelings of loss, are really tied to this pandemic. But we know that students, we have two classes of students that haven't had a traditional UCLA experience, and so we know that there is isolation and students are feeling like they don't have community yet. We also know that there's social anxiety about returning to campus, whether you're working or as a student. Sometimes there's still that anxiety of, am I really going to be around all these people, and how do I still build that community if I don't want to be around people that I want to take certain safety precautions. We also know that for the past 18 months, people put life events on hold or made them look different, and also we had set routines that we got used to, and now with the pandemic, being at home and then now hybrid models, those have really changed up for people, and so it's hard to kind of navigate our productivity and what we're trying to do, but we're still transitioning and kind of getting used to whatever our normal is for the time. So I know that I kind of rushed that slide, and I know it can be a little bit heavier thinking about everything that we're going through, but it's just kind of to name what's going on with students and with ourselves, that we can then know what to do going forward. And so how can we create a sustainable culture of health? By planning. The P stands for proactively promote mental health resources. So again, where in our departments and our offices can we display mental health resources? Where in our websites can we put them? If by any chance any of you are faculty as well, where can we put this in our syllabi? As I said, in our staff meetings, can we share take 1 minute to share mental health or wellness resource on campus, so that it's a little bit more fresh for all of our staff. So where can we make sure that we are getting this information out, again, in our own spheres of influence? The next thing is just leading with compassion and care. Many times we do have these processes set up, and it's helpful to kind of look at the processes. Are they further isolating students? Are they causing further kind of stressors for students? Is there a way that we can be flexible, but also maintain our what we need to be able to be effective and efficient in providing services? So kind of looking at that critical lens of, are there things that we can do to implement some more care, compassion? Even if you have student employees, maybe one thing is just in staff meetings with them, giving them some time to connect with each other. So again, to build that community piece that many students are so lacking. The next thing is asking about well-being. And what I love to say about this one is the more, many times we still feel uncomfortable asking, and we don't want to be nosy, we don't want to pry. But the best thing we can do is from the get-go, really incorporating that, if you work with any students, that you care for them as a whole student. And so if at any point in their performance or any kind of interactions that you have with them, if mental health comes up, then you would check in with them. So again, this is setting that expectation earlier on, so that when it happens, it's not out of the blue, and it's just a little bit more commonplace, so that students know that, okay, here at UCLA, we can talk about our mental health, and we are kind of whole students, not just what I'm here to see you about. And then the last thing, as I said before, is just with that critical eye, just note any students' feedback. Are there ways that we can gather student feedback, whether formally or informally, that can really inform our processes and inform what we do for students. And just making sure that we are able to implement that regularly to make sure that we are able to, again, be compassionate and care for our students where we can be a little bit more flexible, but also with ourselves, and understanding that, again, we're still going through this all. So again, just naming this and humanizing it so that, we're all working for the same goal. So that is what we can do in terms of planning. And throughout this rest of the presentation, what we'll be doing is breaking down helping stages, what you can do to help assist a student that is in distress or distressing others. And then at the very end, we'll be talking about specific resources that you can utilize with any students that you work with. But before we jump into that, we do have a case study. And this is a TA example, but I'm sure this is applicable in any of your own roles that you do have on campus. But a TA received an email from a student, Tyler, who apologized for missing the discussion session and for being late in turning in an assignment. Tyler indicated that he had a family crisis and has had difficulty concentrating on academics. Upon speaking with the student, the TA finds out that Tyler's father passed away from COVID in spring quarter 2021. Since then, the student has been crying and sleeping more than usual. The student is a transfer student who was admitted in the fall of 2020. Tyler's pronouns are he, him. So I'll keep this on the screen, but I'd love to just open it up to what concerns might we all have about the situation. Again, I know this is a kind of a classroom experience, but in any kind of experience that you might have as students, they might, open up in the same way. So what initial concerns might you have regarding Tyler? Feel free to put in the chat or speak up if that's easier.
I think depression, given the oversleeping and sleeping more than usual, is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so the students' behaviors of sleeping in more than usual, crying, possibly might indicate some depression. So thank you for bringing that up.
I'm wondering about his support system.
Yeah, do you mind speaking on a little bit more about that?
How's his family doing? Who does he have to talk to? Who does he have to lean on? Does he have siblings that are younger than him that he may need to support as well? And it could be a crushing burden to figure out how to support everyone, especially if his mother is leaning on him as well.
Perfect. Wonderful response. Thank you so much. Yes, the support system is something that we probably have a concern about. As you mentioned, how's the family doing? Do does Tyler have any siblings that can support him? But also, we see that Tyler is a transfer student that was admitted fall of 2020. So that might clue us in that Tyler might not have a community here at UCLA yet because he started when we were remote. And we know that students, when students that started remotely were having a little bit more trouble building that community. And so, yeah, I would love to kind of check in with Tyler about, what kind of community does he have. Thank you for sharing that. Any others?
Does he live on campus or off campus?
Yeah, that's a great point. The living situation would be very in turmoil at that point. So perfect concern to have. We know that students that live on campus have an RA, so they might have a little bit more support system or easier access to getting support resources. That's wonderful.
Also, as a transfer student, I would wonder how, does he have a lot of friends on campus, or, how is, I guess that ties in with the support system piece, but, how much support or how many buddies and friends does he have here locally that he can talk to, that he might be, more comfortable speaking to about how he's feeling?
That's wonderful. Thank you. And that actually leads us into the next question. What questions would you ask the students? And so what I've heard so far is, what kind of support system do you have? Is your family a support system? Are your siblings a support system? Do you have any friends here at UCLA that can support you? Excellent questions to kind of get a sense of the student's safety net, but also, who the student is connected to. Are there any other questions that you would want to ask Tyler?
How can I help?
Absolutely. Wonderful.
That's what I ask.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. How can I help? Sometimes, students don't know that staff can help and can give them resources, or might feel like a burden. And so that offer can really help a student feel more comfortable to disclose what might be going on, or, share, actually, I do need help. This is how you can help me. It's a wonderful question. And I'm sorry, I'm having a problem seeing the chats. Okay, there's nothing there. Any other questions? A question that usually comes up from our audiences is usually, are you a harm to yourself or others? Basically, we want to check in with Tyler to kind of see where he is at. And so, have you considered suicide, or, this is a little bit more of a pointed question, but we would want to kind of just check in with Tyler to see where he's at in terms of handling this, because of, transitioning to new school, losing parents. We want to kind of just check in with where Tyler is at. So, checking in on their safety and well-being would be critical. Yes, Karen.
I was just going to say that with students who lose a parent, when I work with them, I will usually talk with them about their financial situation, because often a parent might have been supporting them financially. So even if they receive financial aid, they may have had an expected family contribution. So I would connect them with the financial aid office to maybe reassess their financial aid package. And oftentimes they can get aid pretty quickly, additional aid, if it's warranted. And then also we have the economic crisis response team that I would often refer students to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen.
I have a question. Do you go by Gabriel or Gabe or?
Gabriel's fine.
Okay. I don't work as closely with students. I work more with staff.
Mhm.
But we do have students here in events and transportation. Is there any kind of a leave also that they may be eligible for if maybe, you know, it's a little too burdensome to try and balance school and life?
Yeah, that's, I'll let Karen answer that.
Yes, that's a very good point. And that's one of the things that we could talk with students about at case management services is, you know, what options might they have? We certainly refer them to their academic counselor for specific options to make sure that if they choose a certain option, that it wouldn't present consequences for them academically. But yes, I mean, dropping one class and keeping the others just to lighten the load might be an option, or taking a class pass, no pass may be an option, or like you said, maybe withdrawal from the quarter. So we always want to make sure that we let students know that there's options, that there's hope, and that we can connect them with the appropriate resources to help them with those choices. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's you know, a really great point to, you know, just check in with the student on, you know, how is this affecting you on a daily basis, and kind of where are you at with, you know, your academics? Do you need support? Sometimes students don't know that this exists for them, and so they don't know what questions to ask. And so the more we can kind of check in with them and get some basic context, then that's when we can refer them to the right resources. Another question I would ask is possibly, what resources have you been connected to? What resources have you tried out? That can really help us in a multitude of ways. The first way is kind of seeing who they're connected to in terms of staff. You know, we can see if they've gone to the council center, but if they haven't, you know, we can also ask, you know, why haven't you, you know, and that can help us kind of clue us in if they might have some misinformation about the resource. They might not know about it. They might have some hesitation that we can easily kind of work through to then make sure it's more realistic that they would be connected to a resource. So as long as we can ask, you know, what resources have you been connected to and why or why not, then that can help us tailor what resources we share with them. And that makes it more likely that they will get connected to those resources. I know we're short on time, and there's a reason we do this case study before we break down how to approach a student and how to refer them. But what referrals do we think we would make for the students? So I've heard case management services. What other places do we know of right now that we can refer students to?
Is CAPS the same answer?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is CAPS the same area or?
Perfect. Yeah, CAPS is a great referral. I'm so sorry. My speaker's been messing up, so I didn't hear you the first time. But yes, CAPS is a great referral resource. And later in the presentation, we'll talk to you about how CAPS and case management are similar, but a little bit different. So
Okay, I was wondering if they were one and the same.
yeah, thank you. Two different offices, but do similar work. Just in light of time, other responses that we've heard before are, you know, possibly getting the student connected to the transfer student center since they are on transfer. So again, utilizing some of the information we're able to gather to then help them refer the student to the right resource. Karen, is there anything else you want to say about this case study before
No,
we go?
I think we've touched on many of the different resources that we want to connect them with.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the reason we have this case study is because we know that we all interact with students in different levels. Some of you all are completely student facing, some of you all are not student facing, and you know, have rare interactions. But the main thing is, again, just humanizing what might be going on and understanding that, you know, it's okay to be a little curious, especially if students don't know that they can share with you, or that there's resources that can help them. A little curiosity can help us make sure that we are getting a student to wherever they need to be. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it to Karen to talk about distress and what are distressing students.
Thank you. So some people ask what's the difference between distressed and distressing. So distressed students we'll talk about are more students that are feeling the crisis and distress more internally. So you can see they're upset, they're crying, but those that are distressing are those that are distressing to the community. So they may be acting in an aggressive way or threatening behavior, intimidating. They may be disruptive in the classroom or otherwise. So that's kind of how we describe it. So the stages of helping, broken it down into 4 stages: notice, approach, engage, and referral. And we'll go through more detail of each of these. So when we're noticing when a student is distressed or distressing, it's easier now that we're in person for most of our classes. So that's really helpful is with regard to faculty, TAs, and staff being able to really identify when students are struggling. So here are many different ways that that we can see that they might be struggling. We can go to the next slide. Gabriel, can we go to the next slide? Wonder if he's having trouble hearing. Can you go to the next slide, Gabriel? Thank you. So concerning behaviors, ones that you may want to reach out more intentionally to either CAPS or to case management services to consult on. These are the more concerning behaviors, especially if you're seeing aggressive, threatening, or intimidating behavior. If someone's making threats to harm someone else, you may need more immediate intervention, such as calling 911, but we'll go over that later. And then impaired speech or disjointed or confused thoughts, and paranoia and suspicious thinking. So for traditionally aged undergraduate students, 18 to 22 is really a time when we see sometimes the beginnings and the first symptoms of a thought disorder. So they can display themselves and present themselves in different ways. So we want to make sure that we're connecting, that you as staff can always call us to consult about these concerns. Students who are feeling this way may not be the ones that are the most readily willing to engage in therapy. So we may have to be creative in ways of getting them help. And then thoughts of suicide or homicidal behavior, we want to make sure that we're connecting and possibly with CAPS right away or with 911. Okay, go to the next slide. And then tips for approaching. So approaching with care. And we always want to do it in the context of care and concern, that you're concerned about them. You want to help them in whatever way you can. And contacting the student to request a time to talk one-on-one. And in some cases, it may not feel safe to meet with that student in person, one-on-one. So there's lots of options for that. In this environment, it's not unusual to request a Zoom meeting or a phone call as opposed to in person. So that's one option. And then another would be to, if you are going to meet with them, not to meet with them alone, to meet with them maybe in a conference room, a larger space, maybe leaving the door open. And then another option potentially is not to meet with them at all if you're really not feeling safe, but getting consultation about what to do next. So we do these days ask for students' current address if you do feel that there is potential for this to be a high-risk situation where you feel you're really concerned about the student. And that is because when the campus went remote in 2020, all of our students moved, most of them moved. We were only down to 10% of the students who used to live in the residence hall stayed. And so many of our students, though, they didn't update their addresses in our system. And still, we don't know. We prompt students to update their address in the system, but we can't be sure that that's the correct address. So we want to make sure we know where the student is at that time. So are they at their current residence? If you're meeting with them remotely or on the phone, are they in a car? If they're in a car, where are they? And then options during Zoom would be to place the student in a breakout, to briefly talk with them if they're becoming agitated or emotional, and maybe say to them, please stay after this program or whatever you're doing at the time, so that you can speak with them one-on-one in more detail, or set up a time to talk with them later. And explaining the reason for your concern. So describe what you observed. I saw that, if it's a student who works for you, we got a report that you're crying during your shift and I really want to check in. Or I saw, when we were having our training that you got really angry, or you seemed really frustrated during the session. And I saw that you threw a pencil during the Zoom meeting. So I just want to check in and make sure you're okay, and just if there's anything I can do to help. Okay, we can go to the next one. And then for engagement, actively listening to them, taking their feelings seriously without judgment, really trying to withhold judgment, because there's probably more to the story that they're not even sharing with you as to what their stress is currently about. Asking open-ended questions, being patient, and giving them enough time to respond. So, that's similar to when Gabriel and I were asking you all questions about the case discussion, trying to be okay with silence so that the student has the space and the room and knows that you're giving your time to them and that you want to hear what they have to say. Avoid advice giving, but letting them know their options. So that's similar to what I was saying before during the case discussion, that we as case managers, we can say to students, oh, I've had students in the past who lightened their load by dropping a class, or lightened their load by, making a class pass, no pass, or withdrawing from the quarter. But we always follow that with, I want to get you connected with an academic counselor to make sure that any of those wouldn't have detrimental consequences to you. And also we want to make sure that we are checking with financial aid to make sure that they wouldn't have any financial aid consequences. So that's why you want to avoid advice giving. And then maintaining interpersonal boundaries appropriate to your relationship. So where we want to be open and listen, we know that you are not trained to be therapists. So that's something that you could say to a student if they keep coming back to you and trying to vent or share with you what's going on. If they're not following up with your referral to my office or CAPS, is to say, I really appreciate that you trust me and that you come to me and that you're opening up to me. But I know that I'm not the right person to be able to help you with this because I haven't trained in the way that these other departments have trained. And I know students have been really helped when they do go to CAPS or case management services. So that can be a way to where it doesn't feel harsh to sort of set those limits and boundaries, because you're saying you appreciate that they're coming to you, that they trust you, but that you want to make sure they're getting the best help that they can, and that these resources are available to them, and that they've already paid for them with their tuition. So that's important. And then the last thing is not promising confidentiality. So we are mandated reporters. All of us are responsible employees. So if we hear of a case of sexual assault, sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, or stalking, we all need to report that to the Title IX office. So making sure that you let the students know that you're not a confidential resource, but that you'll maintain their privacy as much as you can. And that if you do need to share with others, it would be in the interest of their safety or other people's safety, but that it would be something to help them. So you can move on to the next slide. And then this pyramid just shows the different levels of care and responses that we can have with a student. So at the top is in emergency situations, which require an immediate referral. So expressions of suicidal thoughts and or intent, expressions of violence toward others, severe loss of emotional control, where they're not able to regain control, bizarre behavior or gross impairment in thinking ability. So that could be a call to 911. But as a campus, we are really committed to working out a way so that we don't have to call police in situations where there's a mental health crisis. We are working on having an avenue so that we could have mental health professionals go out and provide welfare checks instead. So we are working toward that because we know that there have been incidents of police brutality throughout the United States, and that we want to avoid that. And also having police there, the student may have had bad experiences with police in the past. So it could escalate the situation, and then also having a police officer there with a gun may also escalate the situation. But for now, the option we have for welfare checks specifically is through our UCPD. And they can actually go out to students' apartments in Westwood as well as on campus. And they have been trained. They would go to the student's door and just knock and then ask them questions to determine whether they need to go to the hospital to be evaluated by a mental health professional. If you're not sure, CAPS is always available. So you can call CAPS and say, this is the situation, this is what's going on. And then CAPS can advise you as to next steps. And you don't need to know the student's address. So if they haven't given you their address, or you've just received an email or a voicemail message where you're really concerned about the student and you haven't been able to reach them when you try to call them, you don't have to know where they live. Rely on CAPS or UCPD to find that information. There's also the emergency room, which is really helpful in cases where there's an emergency. If the student can get there on their own or with the help of a family member or a roommate, that may be the right avenue too. And then the next level is signs that a student may be experiencing more stress than they can handle. And those are some of the resources. So the CRT, I'll tell you more about later, but Case Management Services works really closely with them. And then CAPS, and we'll explain those other resources as well. So we can go to the next slide. And then when to call 911 for a welfare check. So if a student has indicated an imminent risk of harm to self or others, and if the student cannot safely get to the hospital themselves or with support, you'd want to be calling 911 for a welfare check. And then, or like I said, you have the option of calling CAPS as well. 24 hours, they can respond. And then the second option is if the student is at imminent risk of harm from another person or persons, but doesn't have the ability to leave that situation in the moment. So if you're on the phone with a student or a Zoom call, we are much more likely to see situations during the remote environment where our students, because we're able to see sometimes into their living situation. So that is another situation where we would want to call and get the student help. And then another emergency that could arise would be either in person or via Zoom if you see that there's a medical or health emergency. That's another time to call 911. Okay, we can move on. And now I will turn it over to Gabriel to talk about CAPS.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate it. So yeah, CAPS, Counseling Psychological Services. We have a continuum of support for students. What we're most known for is that individual therapy. So we are a short-term intimate counseling center. So that means we're not seeing students on a weekly basis as in traditional therapy, but we do see students a couple times every academic year. So for details, we have about 4 sessions for all UCLA students, regardless of their insurance, and then an additional 4 sessions for students that have the UC SHIP. So we see students a couple times every academic year. We have therapy groups. So these are groups with a clinician, but also 5 to 8 students regarding a special topic, identity, individual diagnoses, and students like this because not only do they have the expertise of the clinician, but they can kind of see the real-time kind of how their peers kind of navigate similar topics, identities, or diagnoses. And so highly recommend you checking our website out to kind of see all the 30 different ones we offer for students. We also have psychiatric consultations. So this is meeting with a psychiatrist in addition to therapy. So this is medication management. And this is the only service that is only for students with UC SHIP or in emergency situations for students without UC SHIP. We have crisis intervention, which I'll talk about in a second. We also do referral to longer term resources and education. So we can help connect students to resources off campus. Should they want more specialized or weekly care, we can help them kind of know where to start, find somebody that could be good for them to help connect. We also can work with students to help understand how to utilize insurance. We know many times it's a student's first time utilizing any insurance or even the UC SHIP insurance. And so we can sit down with them, help it to kind of be more manageable, help them to understand the different terminology such as copay, benefits, and all that, so that students can utilize their mental health benefits and feel secure using them. We also have self-help support. So we do have online resources, a toolbox called Therapy Systems Online that students, staff, and faculty can utilize to kind of learn more about different mental health topics. And you can go to our website for that. You just sign up with your UCLA email and it will be free to utilize. We also have some specialized care for students with international students. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and send a PDF that has all this information. We don't send the slides, but we do have a PDF that has all this information summarized point for point. And we'll be emailing it to the coordinators, Jerry. And then we also have resources guide that has some of our online resources, but also mental health resources on campus that is helpful for you all. So that will be sent out. So how do people get connected to CAPS? It's 2 quick steps. All they have to do is to request a teletriage appointment. And that is by calling into our center Monday through Thursday, 9 to 4, and Fridays, 9 to 3. If it is an emergency, the student can walk in, but during COVID, we're trying to not have as many people in our waiting room. So that's why we prefer the student to call in. Really quick and easy. Basically, they would get a same-day appointment with one of our triage clinicians who would hopefully help stabilize them in the moment, understand what their needs are, and kind of discuss what the student could utilize, and then give them a couple different things. The first thing would be UCLA resources that they might not know about that can be beneficial to whatever they may be facing. We can also get them connected with ongoing therapists at our center or off campus. And so basically this is the first place students would go. So they just call in, same day appointment, and get connected to wherever they need to go. For fees, I'm not going to go into too much specifics, but the biggest thing you can say, many times students are nervous to come to CAPS because they think there's exorbitant fees associated. If they have UC SHIP, all of it's prepaid, so there's no additional fees. If they don't have UC SHIP, it's only $15 per session, whether it's individual or group therapy. And then we also have drop-in hours. So these are really great resources for students with intersectional identities, especially if they're part of the CPO, so Community Programs Office, or the Resource Center, LGBTQ Campus Resource Center, Transfer Student, Black Resource Center, or any underrepresented student population. But these are really kind of intermediate steps. So if a student is nervous about connecting with CAPS, they can go to these drop-in hours, which happen Monday through Thursday, 1 to 3 p.m. No appointment necessary, they just show up and they can be seen by one of our clinicians. And this isn't therapy, which is more of an informal conversation to help them understand what resources they have on campus that can help them navigate whatever they might be facing. And also give them more information about CAPS and case management services if it's appropriate for them. But highly recommend students check these out. These are new this quarter, and we'll be continuing on every quarter, but they are in SAC, Kirkhoff, Mondays through Thursdays. And then, like I said, we do have emergency access, 24-hour access line, which is our main number. So we only have one number for CAPS. It's highlighted right there. I always recommend people putting this in their phone right now so that if you're ever in an emergency or critical situation, it's one less thing you have to think about. And so this number is available 24/7, even on holidays. And so people can access this, or students can access this whenever they need to. If it's during the day, it'll be talk to one of our clinical coordinators after hours. They'll be talking to one of our clinicians on call. This is on the back of every student ID, student, staff, and faculty ID, as well as a suicide prevention hotline number. Yes, students do receive this information during their orientations, but 1,000 different offices are sharing everything, so sometimes students forget. And so that's where we love your help in making sure students know about these resources. You can also consult with CAPS if you're ever concerned about a student you're working with, or just didn't like how a situation kind of unfolded and kind of unsure what the next steps are. We can't tell you the student is on our center, but we can give you general tips on how to get the student to our center or make sure that the student has the resources that they need. And so we're happy to consult with you all. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Karen to talk about case management services.
Thank you. So we can go to the next slide. So my office is case management services, and one big difference between our office and CAPS is that we don't provide therapy or treatment. So we are more like in the sense of social work, where we sort of help the student with identifying what resources they have, making sure they are utilizing the support system that they have, and kind of helping them with just problem solving and providing support. So what we do as case managers is we manage the referrals that come into the consultation and response team. So all of those referrals come to us, and then we determine the appropriate level of response. So we can provide academic support to students, including advocacy with faculty and departments. So sometimes staff who are on the academic side of the house like to refer to us so that we can email the students' professors, ask for extensions, incompletes, et cetera, and just advocate on their behalf. We can provide referrals, and we can consult with you all, staff, faculty. We're happy to consult about student situations. We are not a 24-hour resource like CAPS, but we're certainly available during regular business hours. And we work with liaisons in various campus departments. We can provide ongoing case management with students as needed, and we provide training such as this. So if your department would like a training, one initiative that we have right now is to reach departments that employ a lot of students. So I heard that one of you is part of campus events, which probably employs a lot of students. So your staff may really benefit from this type of training if they're supervising a lot of students, because certainly these types of crises can get in the way of their employment. They may call in sick or have other issues where they may not be able to continue with certain shifts, and they may share about a crisis that they're having in their lives. One other big difference between our office and CAPS is that our office complies with FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. We do maintain confidentiality for our students, but we do explain to them that we are not confidential in the same way as CAPS is. So we are mandated reporters, like I was saying, with regard to any kind of sexual violence or harassment. And then we also, of course, would need to report any child abuse or elder abuse. And we would need to take steps such as possibly contacting emergency contacts if a student might be at risk of harm to self or others. And so we can go on to the next slide. So in order to engage case management services, you as a staff member could submit an online report, or the student themselves could self-refer by filling out an online report, and I'll show you that in a second. We also can be reached at this phone number that's on the screen and also this email. We are meeting with students in person as well as by phone and through Zoom. We can schedule Zoom trainings or in-person trainings with your department. And we try to do that at a time that's convenient for your staff. We also have a new CCLE site called How to Help Students in Crisis. So please feel free to access that site for lots of resources. And if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, we provide lots of resources through that. We'll go to the next slide. The consultation and response team, some of you may have already heard about what we do. We are a behavioral intervention team. And that means that for those students that might be at risk of harm to self or others, or those that may just be disruptive to the campus community, or those that are in need of care and therapy but are not seeking that help, we consult typically weekly. We have a really nice interdisciplinary team, and we are able to do risk assessment and threat assessment on those student situations. Go to the next slide. And then referring to case management services and referring to the consultation and response team is the same process. You just go to studentincrisis.ucla.edu and you go on the home page. You'll see on the upper right-hand corner a yellow tab that says refer a student. And when you click on that, an online form will come up, and then you just complete that form and submit it. And then we will look at the most sensitive approach to that student. We will try to come up with an intervention or just consult with the department about that student. And like I said, can provide risk assessment and threat assessment. So we can go to the next slide. There are other threat assessment teams on our campus. So the next one is the BIT team, the Behavioral Intervention Team. And that is a team that works with situations where staff, faculty, or community members are in distress, disruptive, or of concern. And then the UCLA Health System Threat Assessment Team, the TAT, is for those situations, for those that are of concern in the UCLA Health System. Go to the next slide.
And due to time, we'll just share one more resource. The final one is the RISE Center, which stands for Resilience in Your Student Experience Center. If you think about CAPS as when the student is ready to talk to somebody or might be in crisis and they need that support. But there's a whole spectrum of students that that need support, whether they're doing fine or maybe just a little bit more stress than they might be able to handle, or just being proactive about their mental health resource or mental health. The RISE Center covers all of those students. So it's that proactive mental health resource, that holistic hub that really provides programs, classes, and trainings to foster and support resilience, connection, and well-being. So if you think about our physical health, we know how much we slept the night before, how nutritiously we ate, how active we're being. But for our mental health, sometimes it's hard for us to think about what did I do to check in on my mental health. That's what the RISE Center does. And so they have really great virtual programming. They have events that they put on, really focus on meditation, mindfulness, community support groups. So I would highly recommend you check out their website. But again, it's for students that are trying to be proactive or just need a place to rest and give themselves that permission. They do have some events that are open to staff and faculty at times. And so I would highly recommend you all checking out that. And finally, for CAPS, we are only student-centered, so there's undergraduate and graduate students. However, there's a separate staff and faculty counseling center that you all can utilize for your own mental health needs. But on the CAPS website, we do have a community provider database. So if you're looking to get connected with therapy off campus, it can help you find somebody based on your insurance type, your area within the UCLA, as well as any kind of identity demographics you're looking to connect with. So therapists of color that speaks Tagalog will be able to help kind of find you somebody that can help. So with that being said, we just want to put up our presentation feedback QR code. Basically, if you just pull out your smartphone, it should open up a link that really just takes 1 or 2 minutes to give us feedback on our presentation. As Karen said, we're happy to do this for any of your for any of your departments. You can connect with Karen or myself and we can help schedule that. But just thank you. We know we kind of had to rush through this since we had a short time. But we want to open up to questions. If Karen, is there anything else you want to mention?
No,
Hi,
I'm
Carrie.
just writing our email addresses in the chat in case you'd like to schedule a presentation or have other questions. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask you for that information. Thank you. So
Yes.
I'm part of events and transportation, and we have a very large student population. So I think this is a very good presentation. Thank you very much. And I think that definitely our managers and supervisors would definitely benefit from this.
Wonderful. Please reach out. We would be happy to provide a presentation.
Any other
Any
questions?
other- Oh, go. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Feel free to put in the chat or speak up, whatever's easiest. I know it is 1:01. I'm not sure if people are rushing to their next meetings. But in the event that there are no more questions, just want to say thank you all for taking the time out of your lunch to be here and to show your care for students. And also, let's continue to humanize what's going on and to empathize with each other and check in with ourselves. It's a very tough time right now. So remember, there are resources for all of us. We can't fill others' cups if our cup is empty. And so just thank you all for being here.